Hey, it's Jason Creel. Let's talk about what your next 100 customers might look like in the lawn care business. And maybe you're saying, well, I don't have 100 customers. I may never have 100 customers. You know, maybe for you it's the next 50, the next 20, the next 10, whatever. But here, over my years of experience, and I'm not basing this off statistics, but just sort of experience in dealing with people, here's kind of an overview of what customers look like, at least in my area. And talking to other people, I think you can resonate with this. So 100 customers, I would say roughly 70% are sure enough keepers. Pay their bill, don't bug you too much, are appreciative of you, think you do a good job. Now this is if you do a good job. I think a lot of lawn care companies do a good job, and the ones who do a bad job, they should get complaints, and I don't blame the customer for firing them. But I'm basing with this as the assumption that your lawn company does pretty good work. So I think 70% are just going to be, wow, I'm so happy I have them as a customer. They, some might even send you I would say perhaps 3% are even exceptional customers that go on the internet and write positive reviews for you, send you a Christmas bonus, leave you a tip, those kind of things where you think that is, I had one I remember years ago. The first time I went and cut his lawn, trimmed his bushes, I think it was maybe supposed to cost $75 or something, I don't remember. He gave me a $100 bill and he said, I'm gonna be offended if you don't help yourself to the drinks on my back porch anytime you come. He had a refrigerator on his back porch, and I thought, wow, this is my kind of customer here. So you have those, maybe just a small percentage that are outstanding, but 70% are keepers and ones you're thankful you have and that you can really build a business with. All right, let's talk about possibly on the negative side. I would say out of 100, 5% you might lose each year. So maybe less, maybe more, but maybe a few of them just move or they have some reason that, not necessarily your fault that they fire you. And then maybe 2%, you're not going to make them happy. They're unhappy with the service, whether it's your fault or not, but they just are unhappy and they're firing you. Perhaps it is your fault, perhaps it's not, but when they think it's your fault, there's probably a 0 to little chance that you're going to convince them it's not your fault. So you understand, and the reason is, the reason this video I'm doing this, I think it's important to understand this on the front end. That way, when you lose a customer, you say, you know what, that's in the 5%. I'm expecting to lose a few. And when you get a customer that's outstanding, you think, wow, that's, I thought that there would be 2 or 3 out of 100 that would leave me tips and compliment me and just tell their neighbors and tell me how great I was doing. And then when you get the 70% that are just normal customers, pay their bill, you don't have to worry about them, they don't complain, they're happy. You think, that's great. I can really build on this next year if I get more and 70% of those are good, then I can really start to build something. All right, let's talk about a few of the other categories in there. And these categories may begin to overlap each other. Some people are going to fit in more than one category. And this is where I think somewhat of a gray area, but you have customers who may be a little more high maintenance, maybe complain, maybe give you a call back and say, hey, you did this wrong, come out and fix it. And maybe that's frustrating for you, but I think I try to encourage my customers, if they're not happy, to call me, let me know, because I would rather them let me know so I can come out and address it than for them to be upset and end up firing me. And so even though you may think, wow, that customer that, they call me and if I don't do just an outstanding job, they're going to let me know it, and I feel like they're always watching me. Maybe that's not as easy as the customer, the 70% who just pay their bill and you may never even met them. But it doesn't mean they're bad customers. It doesn't mean you overreact and say, I wish I didn't have them, I'm going to get rid of them. You know, you can't, at least I wouldn't recommend overreacting and just throwing them out and saying, I just want that 70%, because maybe this is 10 to 15% that are a little more high maintenance. Well, you know, I don't want to lose 10 to 15% of my customers just because they're a little more work, you know. And so I think they're keepers. You just have to understand that that's part of it. Maybe a small percentage or a little more high maintenance because they're home and they want to come out and talk to you. You know, it seems like 10 to 15 minute chat every time you come by, and you're thinking, I've got to go. This is costing me money. You know, but again, some of that is just part of the job. Now, if they want to talk for an hour, you just have to politely think of a way to not talk for an hour, because that sure enough will start to cost you money, especially if you've got employees standing around waiting on you. So, but you know, again, I don't think these people are not keepers. Another category is people who, and these are not keepers. I would say out of 100 customers, 1 or 2 of them are not going to pay you. I'm saying not like they forgot to pay you. I mean, they intentionally are not going to pay you. They are taking advantage of you, and those are not keepers. And some of them you can call them and, you know, go to their house and knock on the door and you might get the money. Some of them you're probably never going to get the money. And that's frustrating. It's actually really frustrating, and you have to get smarter in how you run your business to make sure that even if that happens, it happens for a small amount of money and not a large amount of money. But just understand that too is part of the business. And so, but thankfully that, at least in my area, is a small percentage of the customers. So there's another maybe 10%, a little higher than I wish it was. And you wouldn't have this if you require a credit card from all your customers. But if you're like me and a lot of people pay with a check, 10% you may have to sort of nudge a little to get the money. You know, they're not being malicious or purposely not paying you. They just forgetful that, you know, in our society today, people write less and less checks. So you call them, you know, it gets time for the next service. You say, hey, you know, I didn't receive payment for last month's service, you know, and they say, oh yeah, you know, I totally forgot. I apologize. I'll leave you a check when you come out for both months, you know, and that you may think, well, I hate having to call them every time. But again, that's not a customer you want to get rid of, in my opinion. I mean, it's you know, you wish you didn't have to. You wish they were in the 70% that just paid all the time. You always count on it. But I think this 10% is worth keeping, because you know they're good for it. They're going to pay. It's just you might have to call them once a month. So, you know, part of it. So, I guess the whole point of the video is understanding that there's categories out there. You know, there's 3% who have toy, maybe it's a higher number, but just kids' toys all over the yard, you constantly have to pick up, or dog poop. You know, it looks like they have 20 dogs in their yard, and there's just a collection of dog poop. So, I mean, you know, that, I don't know. You might have to make a statement about that at some point and just say, hey, you know, we love having you as a customer, but it seems like every time we come, we have to spend quite a bit of time picking up the children's toys. If you wouldn't mind on Wednesdays when we come, could you try to have some of the toys picked up, or same thing about the dog poop. You know, it's one thing to have a pile or two, but if it looks like you know, a museum collection's worth, then we may have to talk about this a little bit. So, but you know, I guess the point is, don't overreact on a customer that fires you. Just say, hey, that's 1 or 2%, and I'm not going to be able to please them. Don't overreact when you have to call one and nudge them to get paid. You know, just say, hey, some people are not detail oriented. You just have to call them, remind them. It's no big deal. You know, it's just part of the business. People are a huge part of the business, and just learning how to deal with those situations in a gracious, gentle way, where you're not offending all the people who don't do things, who are not in that 70% that just mail it in, you never have to talk to, you know. let's try not to offend the other 30. You know, maybe it won't work out, you know, especially the ones who don't pay at all. It's not going to work out. But even in those situations, you don't want to, you know, threaten them or offend them to the point that your business develops a bad reputation. So I think it's important to understand there's these types of customers out there and how to deal with them. And so obviously I've left out categories. There's 5% that do this, there's 10% that do this. And so in the comments, if you want to say, hey, what about the 10% that do this? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. So I hope this helps. Thanks a lot.